The shimmering glass facade of the Titan Group headquarters towered above me, a monolith of cold ambition. To the world, I was just Liam, a junior analyst living in a cramped studio apartment, riding a beat-up scooter that sounded like a lawnmower. No one knew that my father, Arthur Sterling, was the CEO up on the top floor sipping espresso and signing million-dollar deals. I had joined the company incognito, obsessed with witnessing the internal gears of the empire I was destined to inherit. But my experiment in humility turned into a nightmare when Julian Thorne, a man draped in expensive silk and unearned arrogance, stormed into our department. He wasn't just a manager, he carried himself with the sickening swagger of a prince. He marched straight to my cubicle, dropped a termination notice on my desk, and announced to the entire office that he was the CEO's long-lost son. I was utterly dumbfounded. If this pathetic, power-tripping imposter was the heir, then who the hell was I? The air in the office went dead silent. The war had just begun. Within a week of his arrival, Julian had transformed our open-plan office into a suffocating, feudal-era barracks. He enforced a ridiculous new corporate honor code, mandating that every employee stand and bow at a 90-degree angle the moment he stepped onto the floor. To ignore this was to invite his wrath. To comply was to surrender every shred of personal dignity. He handpicked a group of sycophants to act as his culture supervisors, led by a spineless man named Kevin, who spent his days documenting the slightest infractions. Sarah, my only genuine friend in the department, was frequently targeted. Julian would hover over her desk, criticizing her performance with biting, condescending remarks while his cronies laughed. He thrived on fear, deliberately setting impossible sales quotas just to watch us scramble. He wanted us desperate, isolated, and obedient. The office, once a place of collaborative hard work, became a minefield of anxiety where one wrong move could cost you your livelihood. I kept my head down, observing his petty cruelty, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. Julian's crusade against me reached its breaking point during the annual company-wide gala. He had booked the city's most pretentious ballroom, turning the night into a grand stage for his ego. As I sat in the corner with Sarah, trying to remain invisible, Julian spotted us. He signaled for the music to stop, plunging the room into an excruciating silence. He strode over, a glass of vintage champagne in hand, his eyes glinting with malicious intent. "Liam," he sneered, his voice projecting across the room, "I hear you've been struggling with the basic logistics of your role. Why don't you show everyone your commitment?" He pointed to a spilled drink on the far side of the ballroom floor. "Clean it up, on your knees. Perhaps then, I'll reconsider keeping you on the payroll." The room erupted in snickers from his loyalists. Sarah gripped my arm, her face pale, but I stood up slowly. I locked eyes with him, my calm defiance burning brighter than his insults. The trap was set, but he had no idea who he was playing with. That night, the bitter sting of the public humiliation fueled my resolve. I returned to my cramped studio, pulled out my encrypted laptop, and bypassed the secondary firewalls of the corporate server. I wasn't just an analyst. I had the clearance of the CEO's son. I dove deep into the archives, tracing Julian's history. It didn't take long to find the trail. He had fabricated his connection to my family using forged documents and manipulated PR records. He was nothing but a grifter, a bottom feeder, who had leveraged a distant, obscure relative's name to manipulate the board. My heart hammered against my ribs as I dialed my father's private line. His voice was steady, calm as ever, until I detailed Julian's charade. A heavy, pregnant silence hung on the line before he growled, "That imposter has no blood connection to this family, Liam. He's a fraud." I had the proof, the leverage, and the truth. Julian thought he was the hunter, but he was actually the prey. The game was finally over. The emergency board meeting was packed with nervous executives. Julian sat at the head of the mahogany table, looking smug, as he prepared to finalize his purge. He stood up, ready to sign the termination papers that would end my career, when the heavy oak doors swung open. I walked in, not in my worn-out jeans, but in a bespoke suit that commanded the room. The silence was instantaneous. Julian's smirk faltered, his bravado crumbling as I tossed a thick manila folder onto the center of the table. "Before you sign those, Julian," I said, my voice echoing with a cold, absolute authority, "you might want to explain these." The folder contained irrefutable evidence of his forgery, embezzlement, and systematic harassment. As the board members flipped through the pages, their faces shifted from confusion to pure, unadulterated rage. Julian stammered, his eyes darting for an exit, but security was already closing in. My father appeared in the doorway, his presence final. The pretender had finally been unmasked, and his reign of terror ended in seconds. With Julian dragged away, the atmosphere in the boardroom shifted from suffocating tension to a wave of genuine relief. I didn't waste a second. I officially introduced myself to the board, not as the shadow analyst, but as the successor ready to lead. I immediately voided the termination notices, starting with Sarah, whom I promoted to department lead to honor her unwavering integrity. I tore up the corporate honor code, and in its place, I implemented a new mandate: meritocracy, transparency, and respect. No more bowing, no more fear, only hard work and fair rewards. As I walked out of the office, the staff looked at me with newfound awe and respect. I hadn't just cleaned house, I had restored the soul of the company. That evening, back at my father's estate, we shared a quiet drink. The charade was over, and I finally understood that true power isn't in a title or a surname. It's about the people you protect and the integrity you defend. My real journey as a leader had just begun.